Chapter 211. Seeing Li Hao's calm smile, Li Wuxiang felt somewhat dazed. Beyond that moment of concern, she suddenly felt a sense of estrangement between them, or to put it another way, they had never been close, so much so that after the pleasantries, there was nothing left to say. Even though by blood they were cousins, but in terms of relationship they seemed even less connected than the disciples from the Tan Palace around Li Hao, who were more closely knit with him. After a brief silence, Li Wuxiang thought of her father's words and the hidden dangers in Liangzhou and immediately sent a message via telepathy. The demons outside the Liangzhou territory are restless. Be careful, if you're in danger, you can send a distress signal. My father is now stationed in Liangzhou and can come to your aid at any time. You too. Li Hao thought of the military report and nodded in response. Li Wuxiang looked at him intently and could vaguely sense that this young man would not be constrained by even the illustrious and radiant divine general mansion if there's a chance. I hope we can meet again in Qizhou, she said softly. Li Hao's expression remained serene, offering no reply. Li Wuxiang sighed softly, bid farewell to Li Hao, and returned to her spot. After Li Wuxiang left, the gazes of the others still lingered on Li Hao, and they began whispering among themselves. Before long, several grandmasters came over to exchange pleasantries with Li Hao, looking to befriend him. They had all heard about the incident in Qizhou and knew that this young man had severed ties with the divine general mansion, but no one took it seriously. After all, everyone wanted to step through the threshold of that divine general mansion. Who would be foolish enough to want to step out? They assumed it was youthful arrogance and that he would eventually come back. By befriending him now, they believed they were providing timely help, which would be a blessing to protect their descendants in the future. Li Hao easily saw through the Grandmaster's calculations. He wasn't disappointed or surprised and simply returned their pleasantries with a distant and cool attitude, which gradually led to fewer people coming over to make small talk. A Grandmaster is detached from mundane affairs, but a Grandmaster also has children, disciples, and sex. With these, there are vulnerabilities. With vulnerabilities, one wishes to cover them up, and so they seek connections, flatter, and enter the pursuit of fame and material gain. When one climbs the steps, it's inevitable to hunch their back. The era of lone fighters is long gone. Even the strong from the Four Stands realm, free in the wide world, must lower their proud heads before the mighty hooves of the Dayu divine dynasty. Otherwise, they would have to be driven away like bereft dogs. Before long, as the sun passed the midday mark on the sundial, a figure swept across from the opposite bank of Dragon River and landed on the debate platform ahead, dressed in a white robe, which was very long and fluttered in the river's breezes. The figure wore a snow-white hooded cloak and had white hair and a youthful face, exuding an immortal bearing and Taoist grace. Hermit Tianji. The many gathered grandmasters already waiting immediately recognized the figure's identity, Omega, M-Tao. After landing, Hermit Tianji lifted the white hood to reveal his flowing white hair, with a rosy complexion and a smile. He slowly surveyed the crowd and said, "Grandmasters who have come from afar, all the way from your territories to attend this gathering, I am endlessly grateful." "Not at all. The hermit is too kind." Numerous grandmasters echoed their pleasantries from below the platform. Li Hao glanced around. There were at least 200 to 300 grandmasters present, including their friends and family. There were nearly 2,000 people here, however. Now with the arrival of Hermit Tianji, the previously noisy environment had become quiet. After completing the opening pleasantries, Hermit Tianji began to talk about the rewards for this grand event, in addition to the benefits the grandmasters would receive from reinforcing their martial arts with each other. There were also prizes provided by Tianji Tower, such as cultivation techniques, treasures, spiritual medicines, etc., all things dear to a martial artist's heart. Furthermore, at the end of the debates, the person voted the number 1 grandmaster will not only receive a spiritual treasure and divine weapon but will also get a chance to enter Tianji Tower's library to choose one peerless technique at will. Such rewards were indeed tempting. After all, the library of Tianji Tower, known for its vast collection, was not one bit less famous than the Listening Rain Tower of the Li family, perhaps even more so. Inside were top-tier peerless techniques that could be useful even for those who had reached the Four Stands realm. But the key was whether one could fully master them. After discussing the rewards, the Grandmaster debates officially commenced. The debates were fairly informal. Not every Grandmaster needed to ascend the platform to partake. It mostly depended on each Grandmaster's own desire to participate. However, most grandmasters present wanted to check their martial arts flaws and direction against other grandmasters. This was a rare opportunity. Soon, an elder grandmaster was the first to step onto the Dao platform. exchanged a few pleasantries and then began to expound his Grandmaster path. His Grandmaster path was the Yin-Yang Tao, inspired by the alternation of the sun and moon and the voidness and substance of Yin and Yang. As the Grandmaster presented his path, the audience became increasingly familiar with his martial arts. However, this did not involve any exposure of his peerless techniques and moves. It was merely akin to promoting the philosophy of his sect. Hearing this Grandmaster's exposition, Li Hao thought of the yin-yang inversion swordsmanship. He gained mastery over this swordsmanship through comprehension using the sword and naturally absorbed the core concept of yin and yang within the technique. This concept was basically the same as that of the Grandmaster before him. But being able to grasp the yin-yang inversion swordsmanship did not necessarily mean one could ascend to the realm of a Grandmaster using its yin and yang philosophy. Conversely, the current Grandmaster managed to create sword techniques, or palm and fist techniques, similar to the yin-yang inversion swordsmanship using the yin-yang Tao with the Grandmaster path. The key lies in the Tao. Once one comprehends the Tao, it follows one's intent. Everyday actions such as eating, punching, and even lifting one's hands are imbued with this path. Chapter 2:12. Yin and Yang divergent sword is a technique which integrates into sword intent when melded with yin-yang Tao. For the Grandmaster path, one becomes the Tao itself, hence every action is a technique. It's easy to cultivate techniques through the Tao, but to comprehend the Tao via techniques is as difficult as sailing against the current or climbing to the heavens. However, with the support of the system panel, Li Hao had already grasped the principles of the yin-yang Tao while cultivating this swordsmanship. Therefore, everything the opponent was saying at the moment he could understand completely. Moreover, he knew that the opponent had hidden some core aspects, namely their peerless technique. After all, that's a trump card to be conscientiously passed down even to a disciple. As the first Grandmaster finished expounding his Tao and threw out a "please advise" to the audience below, a brief silence was soon broken by another Grandmaster stepping onto the stage to refute with their own Tao, arguing that the yin-yang Tao was not perfect and the Tao of this Grandmaster was the ape Tao. He named it himself for the very reason that since his youth he had observed monkeys, discerning the principles of heaven and martial arts from them, which led him to the Tao. For his disciples, the first step upon entering his school was often to start by observing apes, too. The cultivation techniques he created were all related to apes. When Grandmasters discussed the Tao, it was not just a matter of eloquence, but also of physical prowess. Soon, the two Grandmasters sparred with each other, both highly restrained, aiming just to touch upon their techniques. It was the kind of spar where it was difficult to tell who was superior. The ape Tao Grandmaster wielded an iron staff with agile and unpredictable moves, devoid of any patterns, while the yin-yang Tao Grandmaster's attacks, merging the illusory with the real, were also enigmatic and elusive, each with their own strengths. While sparring with each other, they were also learning and thinking, and after the exchange, both reaped considerable benefits. But this Tao debate took up an entire hour. Previous Grandmaster Tao debates lasted for at least 3 days, with some even lasting half a month. They were not conferences that could be completed in just a day or two. Li Hao thought it would be fascinating at first, but as he watched, he began to feel somewhat bored. He immediately understood the Tao discussed by the two, but they kept going on, elaborating over and over with lengthy speeches, as if afraid others wouldn't understand. He just wanted to slide the progress bar or click on double speed. But alas, this was reality, and he had no power to manipulate time. He could only sit restlessly, fidgeting uncomfortably. Finally, the next Grandmaster took the stage. Some practiced the feather transformation Tao, entering the Tao through observing the metamorphosis of butterflies. Some followed the 5 elements Tao, using their 5 viscera as a foundation, developing into 5 great mountains with stable and endless offense and defense. Some delved into the crimson flame Tao, utilizing the offensive prowess of the fire element among the 5 elements to break through all techniques. With just a bit of listening, Li Hao could understand the concepts of these Grandmasters' Tao realms. The types of cultivation techniques he practiced were diverse, and many of these had also been established by various Grandmasters, encompassing numerous martial art concepts. It was precisely because of this that he could cultivate an expansive mindset and martial knowledge that embraced all things. And upon listening, Li Hao discovered the simpler the Grandmaster path, the easier it was to comprehend to an incredibly profound level, thus stepping into the great Grandmaster realm more quickly. Epsilon, for example, the Grandmaster of the Crimson Flame Tao, even managed to gain a slight advantage over the Grandmaster of the 5 elements Tao, the previous ape Tao Grandmaster, when sparring with the Yin Yang Tao Grandmaster. also saw that the span of Tao intent in Yin-Yang Tao was broader, but regretfully, the Grandmaster had not comprehended it to the deepest level. The Great Tao is the simplest. Li Hao had an epiphany. This was also what he was seeking here. He could grasp the Tao realms of all things one by one, but it would take a lot of time, and the effect on his own power would not be significant. In short, the cost-benefit was not high. Hence, what he sought was the core of all things, a process from complex to simple. If he continued to pursue complex Tao realms, he would find himself in the same situation as the Yin-Yang Tao Grandmaster, spending time expanding the breadth of his Tao realm, only to ultimately hinder his cultivation and be overtaken by those Grandmasters with a singular Tao realm. The principle of one move fresh beats all applies everywhere. If it doesn't work, it means this move hasn't been practiced to perfection. But if one could condense the complex Tao into a single move, then this move would undoubtedly be incredibly formidable beyond imagination. Li Hao silently listened, seeking the flash of inspiration in their conversation. This flash was the commonality he sought in all things. Regrettably, that hint of inspiration showed no signs of emerging. Amitabha. The Grandmaster path I cultivate derives from the roots of human nature, the Wrath Tao, being one of the three poisons: greed, anger, and delusion. The Kasaya-clad young man stepped onto the stage, his garment symbolizing a certain existence that quieted the whispers of the Grandmasters sitting below. The Wrath Tao. Can one enter the Tao through emotions? Worthy of being a direct disciple of the Buddha Lord. What an ingenious angle for entering the Tao. Hearing the other party's speech, many Grandmasters were astonished. Experiencing a sudden understanding, most Grandmasters entered the Tao by observing the heavens and earth, the sun, the moon, the stars, and all creatures. But this young man had entered the Tao through human nature, which was somewhat peculiar and rare. Seeing the Kasaya on the other person, Li Hao frowned slightly, a subtle sharpness flashing in his eyes. Mount Wuliang, the poison behind the pill sought by that vile woman, was facilitated by Mount Wuliang. In fact, it was very likely that Mount Wuliang intended for this to occur, or even actively enticed it. Otherwise, even if that venomous woman had the inclination, without knowledge of such a pill, she would have had to choose another method. As long as there is life, there are the primal thoughts of greed, anger, and delusion. Demons crave blood, characteristic of greed. Aggressive temperaments signify wrath. Even plants follow suit. Growing towards the sun is greed, rooting deeply and spreading is wrath. Chapter 213. On the platform, the Kasaya-clad young man continued to expound slowly. His voice was mild and peaceful, like a ray of Buddha's light shining amidst the cold winds by the Dragon River, which made everyone feel as if they were basked in the warm breeze of spring. Li Hao listened quietly to the other's words. He had not cultivated the Buddha's cultivation techniques, but as he listened now, he quickly grasped their essential ideas. This also added a new line of thought to his Tao of all things. Even human nature could be incorporated into the Tao, but what commonality did greed, anger, and delusion share with birds, beasts, and plants? Li Hao fell into contemplation. What, after all, was that common element? Or to put it another way, do all things truly share something in common? If not, then the unity he had been ardently seeking would be an ephemeral phantom, and he would be doomed to never fully realize his Grandmaster path, only to step into the three immortal realms with the status of an ordinary great Grandmaster. While Li Hao was in contemplation, the young man above continued to speak ceaselessly. When he reached the end, he looked towards the many Grandmasters below, but his gaze suddenly shifted to Li Hao, and with a smile he said, "I've heard that Dayu has produced a genius once in a millennium, who entered the Grandmaster realm at the age of 14, unparalleled in history. May I have the honor of learning a thing or two from him?" Upon hearing his words, everyone snapped back to reality, and their gazes turned in unison towards Li Hao. They showed expectation and mockery in their eyes, having long wished to see if this legendary youth was truly as remarkable as his reputation suggested. They had been curious before, but the noble surname of this young man had deterred them from rashly offending him. He is one of the direct disciples of the Buddha and is also ranked first on the Qian Dragon list. Shen Yunqing's expression shifted slightly as he warned Li Hao. Being from Qingzhou, he understood the process of that great battle and also knew of Li Hao's friction with Li Qianfeng, who was a disciple of the Buddha. This young man before him was actually Li Qianfeng's senior fellow disciple. Suddenly being called out by him was most likely an attempt to win some face for his junior brother or perhaps to stand up for the Buddha himself, although Shun Yunqing and the other disciples of Tan Palace did not participate in the real dragon competition of the Li family that day. The events that took place at the subsequent banquet had already been widely circulated. Li Hao had nearly killed a direct disciple of the Buddha with a mere chopstick. This news was too shocking and had spread far and wide, impossible to suppress. If it had been merely a rumor, it would have already been quelled, but it was the truth, and all the guests at the banquet were witnesses, which led to the story being discussed with gusto and spreading everywhere. Li Wushuang, who was sitting to the side, also had a change in expression, with anger flashing in her eyes as she stared at the young man on stage. She had just felt that his grandmaster path had opened up new perspectives for her and had even secretly admired him, but his words had now directly moved to target Li Hao. She could not fail to see that he was deliberately provoking them. Story source Mvlumpr. Li Hao's gaze met with that of the young man on stage, and although both of them wore smiles on their faces, Li Hao could see the coldness in the other's eyes, greed, anger, and delusion. It seemed that the other was committing the error of anger. Li Hao felt an urge to laugh. He had not yet sought trouble with the other, but here the other was coming to him first. If it's just for a discussion of the Tao, I'm not interested, Li Hao said indifferently. This was not a retreat but rather a provocation to the other party. Debates on the Tao were supposed to stop at the point, but he had no interest in dragging things out with the other. If he made a move, it would be best if he could disable the other altogether. Could it be that Li is not here for a Tao debate? Qin Wuk narrowed his eyes slightly and chuckled. He was a revered figure in the Buddha's faith at the Heavenman Treasure Aspect realm, just half a step away from reaching the Grandmaster Great Perfection with a pure and unified Tao heart. Coming here to debate was for the purpose of confirming his Tao's perfection. He recognized Li Hao when he saw him beating the drum at the gateway. Whether I debate or not depends on my mood, Li Hao said, also smiling. I just feel that your Tao is too rudimentary to be considered a genuine path, that's all. At these words everyone was stunned. Qin Wuk, a direct disciple of the Buddha, had expounded a Tao heart that was anything but simple. Merely using anger as an entry point into the Tao demonstrated its profundity. Yet Li Hao was calling it rudimentary. The smile on Qin Wuk's face remained unchanged as he said, since Li believes my Tao heart to be rudimentary, I would like to ask about Li's Tao heart. I've heard that you attained the heavenly human realm during a sword fight with your father, Duke Xingwu. Could it be that Li's Tao heart is one of murderous intent towards kin and patricide? At these words, the room fell into a slight silence. People had heard of the incident, but no one dared to mention it in front of the Divine General Mansion, as it was a scandal for the Li family now that Qin Wuk had brazenly brought it up. Many looked at the young man with expressions of ridicule and amusement. They wouldn't dare to provoke the Divine General Mansion, but Mount Wuliang would, and so these words that only someone from Mount Wuliang dared to utter became their voice by proxy. Li Wushuang's expression shifted. Subtlety and rage burned even more in her eyes. The incident was a scandal for the Divine General Mansion, but she understood the circumstance and knew it was not Li Hao's fault, hence her indignation at it being publicly mentioned was equivalent to a slap in the face to the Divine General Mansion. Li Hao locked gazes with the other, but the smile on his face had disappeared. Do you really want to discuss the Tao? Li Hao asked softly. Qin Wuk's smile widened slightly. Please enlighten me, Li. Li Hao did not respond. Lifting his hand, he beckoned for a pebble from the ground to rise into his palm. The pebble spun rapidly, polished to a shine, and became a snow-white chess piece. All things in heaven and earth can enter the Tao. If you can catch this piece of mine, it will prove that there is still something redeemable in your Grandmaster's Tao, Li Hao said calmly, his words clearly reaching everyone present. As people watched in amazement, Li Hao lifted his hand as if playing chess. Pinching the chess piece and gently pressed it, the chess piece flew out, heading straight for the debate platform. The nail-sized piece suddenly became the focal point for countless energies that gathered around it, encapsulating the chess piece with a soft inner strength and a hard outer layer, radiating divine halos and streams of luminescence. Chapter 2:14. At the same moment, Li Hao's back emitted an astonishing presence, revealing a majestic phantom figure. It was the heaven and earth law manifestation. The 100 Zhangtal law manifestation loomed over the entire inner area, exuding an aura of dominance that seemed godlike and unapproachable. The law manifestation raised its hand, and its massive palm, large as a giant fan, seemed to pinch that dust-sized chess piece. At that moment, the chess piece gathered energy, shining like a sun-emitting aurora light, and with the law manifestation's fingers, it pressed down directly onto Qin Wuk's head. Like placing a piece on a chessboard, with no regrets once set, Qin Wu's face changed abruptly as he felt a terrifying momentum from the towering law manifestation as if facing mountains and rivers, the sun, moon, and stars. The falling piece was not merely a small stone but appeared to be a mountain with no visible edges. Such a spirit left him shocked and unable to fathom immeasurable golden body. Sensing danger, Qin Wu bellowed furiously, issuing a thunderous Buddhist chant, no longer caring to maintain the solemn and gentle demeanor from before. His divine soul was summoned behind him, radiating golden light, donning a kasaya, and wearing Buddha beads, looking compassionate as if delivering all beings. But at this moment, as he exerted power, his expression twisted ferociously. His wrath Tao was merciless and brutal in its offense, filled with towering rage. Like a Vajra consumed by fury. Heaven-opening divine palm. The radiant, immeasurable golden body divine soul burned with intense divine might, flames seemingly wrapping around his body, and with both hands raised, he fiercely slapped towards the white chess piece above. But the chess piece at that moment, like a micro-sun emitting ultimate dazzling light, illuminated heaven and earth, flashing in unbearable brilliance as the heaven and earth law manifestation's fingers pressed down, carrying an aura that could penetrate the nine nether. The entire debate platform shook, and the waves of the Dragon River beside it surged as if they were being drawn and swept across the debate platform. A massive roar erupted. Under the dazzling light between the law manifestation's fingers, the splendid divine palm was forcefully eroded. That one finger was not merely a chess move but contained the Tao and the object control realm power cultivated by Li Hao. His power of object control surpassed that of the royal family. Even if the opponent was a direct disciple of the Buddha master, the object control chi circulation skill he practiced was incomparable to that of the royal family. Great Buddha golden body. The Buddha is immeasurable. Under the collapsing divine palm, Qin Wu's eyes were about to split as he roared to the sky. From his body's 84,000 pores burst waves of energy as the major meridians surged, and an opened yang meridian was also stimulated to its limit, turning the object control power into a divine palm that once again struck towards that finger. However, the heaven and earth law manifestation's finger seemed unstoppable, pressing down mercilessly with supreme rules. The breath of a mountain's collapse and a tsunami's fury blew Qin Wu's kasaya into the air. He glared fiercely, only to see his own palm, gathered with all his strength and infused with the rage of his Tao heart and wrath Tao, crumbling and shattering inch by inch under that relentless finger's pressure. The brightly shining chess piece, like a comet from beyond the skies, was reflected in his pupils. It pressed down straight to between his eyebrows. The chess piece was an ordinary stone, untouched by the fierce exchange, protected by the massive and potent object control power surrounding it. This power still had the strength to spare and protect the chess piece from shattering, indicating that it was not Li Hao's full effort. At that moment, this overwhelming force landed directly on Qin Wu's shoulder with a cracking sound. His shoulder bones were compressed as if shattering, his legs trembling under support. His feet already deeply embedded into the stone slabs of the Tao platform, even causing the vast stone platform to crack slightly. In the end, his physical body was not strong enough. His knees gave way abruptly, and he knelt hard on the ground, blood splattering from his knees onto his face and kasaya. After that, the force continued without abating, still pressing down with the chess piece relentlessly. His body was forced onto the debate platform, his limbs lying limp as if paralyzed, pressed tight against the stone floor of the debate platform from below the platform. It looked as though he was pinned down by a finger of the heaven and earth law manifestation, unable to move, like a flailing toad. Chapter 215. This scene erupted abruptly, extremely sudden, and everyone had not yet reacted. It wasn't until they saw the huge heaven and earth law manifestation burning with divine might, and the Buddha's direct disciple being suppressed by the flick of a finger at the tip of the manifestation, that everyone was shocked and dismayed. This was the Buddha's direct disciple who ranked first on the Qian Dragon list. Famous at a young age, he entered the Grandmaster realm at 19 and suppressed the Qian Dragon list for a full 3 years. During this period, the title of #1 young prodigy in the world was unshakable. And now, just a few months shy of turning 22 and leaving the list, he was suppressed on the platform by a single finger, motionless like a dead dog. Please show mercy. In this deadly silence, where not even the sound of a pin drop could be heard, the only thing that seemed unaffected was the sound of sand and waves from the Dragon River still surging and scouring the debate platform. Hermit Tianji was the first to react. Moving quickly to bear a part of the force of the chess piece, the moment he made contact, he felt an unimaginable terrifying power contained in the seemingly ordinary stone, with the burning divine flame intense like the sun, seeming to Incinerate everything. While he was secretly alarmed, he hurriedly said to Li Hao, Grandmaster, debating should stop at the point of contact. Please don't take a life. As an immortal of the three immortal realms, he naturally couldn't stand by and watch the Buddha's direct disciple be crushed into a pulp by that young man's finger in full view of the public. Otherwise, the Buddha seated in the Brahma Pure Land world would be furious, and his anger was something Tianji Tower wouldn't be able to bear. Blocked by Hermit Tianji, the other four companions accompanying Qin Wuk also came to their senses. One of the middle-aged arhats clad in red gold kasaya suddenly stepped forward, rushing to Qin Wuk's side and angrily said to Li Hao, "This is just a debate. Do you also intend to kill?" Li Hao sneered lightly and said, "I'm simply debating as well. Why are you so agitated?" His response was almost a mirrored retort. Although he indeed harbored the intent to kill, he would not kill a Buddha's son in public, or else the Buddha would have a justified reason to trouble him openly. Moreover, this Buddha's son also probably had a noble rank for protection. Unless the opponent agreed to an unruly sparring, to kill him publicly on the Dao platform would also be a violation of the Dayu divine dynasty's laws. Upon hearing Li Hao's words, the middle-aged arhat's eyes bulged. In fury, like an enraged Vajra, a debate? Is pressing someone down on the ground and rubbing their face in it considered a debate? However, this was indeed within the scope of a grandmaster's debate. Blame it on Qin Wuk's incompetence, or, rather, the terrifying might of this young man. The towering heaven and earth law manifestation even made the middle-aged arhat feel a trace of palpitations, having never seen such a colossal divine soul. To simply let the divine soul swell to such a size, he might be capable, but when it came to power, he was perhaps inferior to its condensed ferocity. In debating, one should stop at the point. You've gone too far. The middle-aged arhat's chest was bubbling with anger, but his expression was solemn and austere, extremely restrained, like a dignified elder advising Li Hao. Vlemperreader. Li Hao's response was indifferent. You said yourself, stop at the point. I focused my power at one point on the chess piece. It's a pity he couldn't catch it. Is this your Buddha's son? He's not much different from the one I defeated with chopsticks before. Hearing Li Hao's words, the middle-aged Vajra and the other three Mount Wuliang venerables were so furious it felt like their lungs might explode. Years of cultivating their temperament meant that at this moment, they all felt the fury rushing to their heads, their bodies trembling. The one mentioned by Li Hao was naturally Li Qianfeng, the youngest direct disciple of the Buddha. He was also Qin Wuk's junior apprentice brother, and the two had a good relationship on ordinary days. Qin Wuk's challenge to Li Hao was also to seek justice for Li Qianfeng and to salvage Mount Wuliang's face, especially since the aftermath of that true dragon battle where Li Qianfeng lost terribly, causing great damage to Mount Wuliang's reputation. But to their dismay, Qin Wuk personally stepped up and ended up losing even more embarrassingly than Li Qianfeng had. Moreover, this was under the scrutiny of all, witnessed by the grandmasters of the world. They could hardly imagine the amount of mockery and ridicule Mount Wuliang would receive behind closed doors from this one battle alone. So young, yet so arrogant and rampant. Is this the behavior of someone from the divine general mansion? No wonder your father has to personally suppress and sort you out, the middle-aged arhat said angrily. Withdraw your hand at once. Such bullying is unlike a grandmaster's demeanor. A flash of cold light appeared in Li Hao's eyes, which then quickly disappeared, as he spoke with a chill tone. Are you saying this to beg for mercy on his behalf? Beg for mercy? Debate inherently has winners and losers. Don't be so unreasonable now that you have the upper hand, said the middle-aged arhat, restraining his anger. At this moment, Qin Wuk was still sprawled on the ground, struggling in vain. The longer he was delayed, the more Mount Wuliang's face was lost. Li Hao sneered. If I have the upper hand, why should I show mercy? You seem to know you're in the wrong. If so, just apologize properly. If you want to beg for mercy and admit defeat, let him say it to me himself. You! The eyes of the middle-aged arhat were filled with furious fire, yet his expression remained stern and solemn. If it weren't for concerns about Li Hao's identity and fear of breaking rules, leading to Mount Wuliang losing even more face, he would have personally suppressed Li Hao by now. Fine. Since it's a debate, then let us have a debate as well. At this point, another venerable from Mount Wuliang spoke up. Besides the middle-aged arhat, the three other Mount Wuliang venerables also came along with Qin Wuk to attend this Grandmaster's conference in Mount Wuliang. The Vajra rank is of the 15 Li realm, the venerables are of the Tianren sect Grandmasters, and the arhats are of the three immortal realms. Above that are the bodhisattvas seated before the Buddha. Let me demonstrate the folly of your arrogance. Chapter 216. One of the middle-aged venerables had already made a daring move. His eyes bulged with anger. His body bathed in Buddha's light, and strings of Buddha beads floated up, encircling him. These Buddha beads contained the formidable might of a spiritual treasure, able to bestow upon him half of his strength. He offered up his divine soul and, along with his own body, employed the Grandmaster technique with a punch. He smashed towards the chess piece atop Qin Wuk's head. That chess piece was like a condensed sun, emitting the ultimate brilliant light, too dazzling to look directly at. The middle-aged venerable's fist contained the doctrine of stillness, the essence of using calm to conquer motion at this moment. Although he struck out in anger, his motion seemed extremely slow. However, his power was not to be underestimated. With a resounding boom, the earth-shattering punch that blasted with a sonic boom ferociously struck the chess piece. Just when everyone thought he was about to shatter that fingertip's brilliant light, suddenly, the middle-aged venerable seemed to have been severely hit. The sleeves of his arms burst apart, his kasaya flowing and his body thrown backward. Blood dripped down profusely from his fist, his skin split open, revealing ghastly white bone. Pupils constricted, everyone was shocked beyond measure. The middle-aged venerable kept retreating, only stopping when the middle-aged arhat supported his back. However, there was a surge of blood flowing in reverse in his face. He violently spat out a mouthful of blood, his pale complexion staring in shock at that chess piece, which was gathering the world's brilliant light. He had felt an incredibly strong reflective force emanating from the small chess piece, like punching an iron plate. At the same time, all the force he had exerted was returned to him in full. He was caught unguarded, which was why he suffered such a severe injury. Although the toughness of his physical body was stronger than an average person in the heavenly human realm, thanks to the Buddhist golden elixirs that fortified his body, it still fell short of a true body refinement practitioner's. At this moment, his internal organs were shaken, his blood flowed erratically, causing his eyes and nose to seep with blood. Impossible, what kind of Tao is this? He said, trembling and in disbelief. The middle-aged arhat, hearing his words, had an ugly expression on his face. The other two venerables were also stunned. Not expecting that the young man could suppress Qin Wuk with one move and still have the power to fend them off, without further ado, the two of them attacked one after another. Both were in the Buddha nature realm, their divine souls like coated with a layer of gold sand. Burning with divine flames, their Buddha natures dignified, radiating immense oppressive force. Out of consideration for Mount Wuliang's reputation, they did not attack Li Hao at the same time, but rather one after the other. One tried to lift that placed chess piece, while the other intended to take the opportunity to pull out Qin Wuk. Li Hao had seen through their intentions. The more Mount Wuliang behaved this way, the more he wanted to ensure they lost all face. The power to control objects transformed into an invisible, insurmountable high wall, and at the same time, Li Hao integrated all the ways of the world that he had comprehended into this force: yin-yang and the five elements, revolution of the sun, moon and stars, mountains, rivers, birds and beasts, and so on. It could deflect power, reduce damage, transfer attacks, redirect strength elsewhere, and even conceal deadly moves in an attack, emerging unpredictably like mushrooms after the rain. With various concepts and martial thoughts merged, his attacks became unpredictable, far surpassing the simple yin-yang Dao or that of the ape technique, encompassing too many variations. Even an ordinary practitioner from the three immortal realms would be slain by his sword, unable to resist the myriad changes in his attacks, let alone these grandmasters. Boom. Content: the venerable who swung the demon-subduing pestle at the chess piece felt a surging power collide with him, and he hastily deployed the Buddhist peerless technique, the nine heavens demon-suppressing skill. The demon-subduing pestle sought to crush the small, ordinary stone with the might of countless mountains pressing down. But as he struck his attack, he felt as if his demon-subduing pestle was stuck in an invisible swamp, the great power seemingly disappearing into the sea, devoured, absorbed. Before he could react, an even more ferocious force rebounded back. Caught off guard, the hand that held the demon-subduing pestle trembled, his palm split open, and then an invisible force struck his chest, sweeping him and the demon-subduing pestle out of the debate platform and crashing to the ground. On the other side, the venerable with the kind face of an old man attempted to drag Qin Wuk out while his companion occupied Li Hao, but when it was time to make his move, he saw his companion being repelled. His expression changed dramatically. And then he heard the whistling sound of the wind approaching. It was another hand of Li Hao's heaven and earth law manifestation slapping down, the fingers flicking a shot. The flicked middle finger was like a sweeping mountain ridge, carrying the momentum of severing heaven and earth as it charged towards him. The old man's face went pale with fright, a trace of terror in his eyes. He hastily threw out a golden disc that grew as the wind caught it, rapidly expanding and spinning in front of him. A beast's head shadow leaped from the disc to roar at the approaching attack, but as it revealed itself, it was immediately struck by the law manifestation's flick. The beast's head crumbled. The disc resonated like a gong blown away and hitting the old man's chest, propelling him into the air along with it. He plunged into the Dragon River. The waves of the Dragon River instantly engulfed him, but not long after, he re-emerged, staggering back onto the debate platform, soaked through, his face deathly pale. In just a brief moment, two venerables had made their moves and both been defeated. All the spectators were in shock. Li Hao, while pinning down Qin Wuk with a single move, also managed to defeat 3 Mount Wuliang venerables effortlessly. What sort of monster was this young man? Tianji Tower had previously ranked him 5th on the Qian Dragon list, and many thought it was inflated. But now, it seemed clear that it was the list itself that was undervaluing him. Such terrifying strength, yet only ranked 5th? It was simply a joke. Chapter 217. The original number 1 was now suppressed by a single finger from Li Hao, and they couldn't imagine where Li Hao should be ranked. You! The middle-aged Arhat looked at Li Hao in shock and anger, having never expected the Qilin son of the Li family to be so terrifying. When he initially heard that Li Qianfeng had been nearly killed by a chopstick, he thought it was an exaggeration. But now it seemed that this young man might be even more fearsome than they imagined. At the tender age of 14, could this young man already be invincible in the Grandmaster realm? The middle-aged Arhat clenched his back teeth tightly, his face turning ashen as he watched the youth down below who wore a cold smile from the latter's eyes. He saw coldness and mockery. He knew that unless he took action himself, this youth was going to cost Mount Wuliang their face. But if he were to make a move, even if he won, it would be no glorious victory. Taking a deep breath, the middle-aged Arhat looked toward the crowd and loudly said, "The Grandmasters debate the Tao, esteemed Grandmasters. Who is willing to enter a debate with this Qilin son of the Li family? If you can defeat him, Mount Wuliang will reward you with a precious treasure." In his extreme rage, his words still managed to retain decorum as he used the debate as a reason. But everyone could hear that this was a call for help, hoping someone would assist in defeating Li Hao and redeem Mount Wuliang's honor. The so-called precious treasure was likely to be an enormous favor from Mount Wuliang. Suddenly, many spectators' eyes began to shine. After all, we're talking about Mount Wuliang. If the true persons of Gan Tao Palace do not step forward, even the Buddha Lord who suppresses the world cannot face this edge. If they could earn the favor of Mount Wuliang, as long as they did not kill a prince in public, it would be an absolute talisman for survival. Haha, since it's about debating the Tao, let me bolster the excitement, the vigor of youth. Allow me to experience it for myself. Soon, an inspired Grandmaster jumped onto the debate platform and said with a big laugh, then, he suddenly drew his sword and with his peerless technique, a divine aura covered the blade, revealing his majestic presence as if he could split mountains and rivers. He aimed a direct slash at Li Hao's finger. The sword's blade contained an annihilating force, a power of decay that seemed could wilt all things. This too was an extremely strong expression of the Grandmaster path. But where there is decay, there is also rebirth. Like the growth of grass and the blooming of flowers, the decaying force did not affect Li Hao. On the contrary, under the reversal of yin and yang, an even more overwhelming philosophy enveloped him, instantly oppressing the sword-wielding Grandmaster and shaking him off the debate platform. Defeat! I'll give it a try too. Immediately, another Grandmaster stepped up to the platform. Without first-hand contact, it was difficult to sense the mystery within Li Hao's finger, but soon, this second Grandmaster to ascend was also flung away by Li Hao's Grandmaster ambience and the power of controlling objects, vlemper only one after another. Grandmasters continued to climb onto the platform from the crowd below, and some had already seen that the young man's strength was unimaginably powerful, likely unbeatable within the same realm, but then they thought, after so many people's consumption, even a Grandmaster has moments of exhaustion. If they could take advantage of a weakness and earn Mount Wuliang's favor, then offending this young master was of no concern. As one grandmaster after another ascended, they too were rapidly sent flying back. It's Lin Qifeng, the great grandmaster from 30 years ago. Is he going to step onto the platform too? The crowd looked toward a person, a thin old man who upon standing up seemed to be shouldering the world, his presence as a grandmaster stepping forth from remote snowy mountains, lofty and untainted. Many grew tense, uncertain whether the young man could withstand the challenge. Soon, the old man took to the platform. He carried no weapon but simply reached casually toward the brilliant light at the tip of the finger, as if plucking a fruit with ease. However, many grandmasters who saw his action had a change in their expression. That effortless bearing, that sense of perfection, impregnable, was indicative of the grandmaster perfection realm. Perhaps with just a sliver of opportunity, he could break free and step into an even higher realm. That was a realm on the verge of transcending the worldly dust. The seemingly casual plucking by his hands was teeming with myriad changes. Surely no bird could escape his grasp, as if it were a caged sparrow. His palm was like a realm itself, capable of suppressing everything. However, as his palm approached the vibrant light of the chess piece, suddenly his hand began to blister and burn. His skin seemed to rot, slashed by countless blades, blood splashing forth. The casual look on Lin Qifeng's face faded, his eyes growing serious. But his hand did not shrink back and continued to reach out. As he drew closer, more wounds appeared on his arm. The magnificent light in front seemed like myriad sharp blades. His fingernails fell off and the nails flipped. The sleeves on his arms completely burst, torn apart. Until at last, just as his hand was about to touch the chess piece, a wild force surged out, roaring like a tiger, reverberating in his eardrums. Lin Qifeng's pupils contracted sharply, his spirit shaken, his aged body suddenly sent flying like a burst burlap sack, as if brutally kicked away. With a thud, Lin Qifeng's body fell outside the debate platform, his arm a bloody mess, flesh laid open, a sight too ghastly to endure. He rose, his formerly otherworldly robes and carefully groomed flowing hair now in disarray and tattered, making him appear utterly disheveled. Lin Qifeng lifted his head, a wisp of blood seeping from his mouth, concealed by the disordered hair. Shocked beyond words deep in his heart, his gaze moved slowly away from the debate platform and landed on another youth seated elsewhere. He suddenly realized that all along, the true self of that young man had not made a move. Chapter 218. A terrifying thought emerged at the bottom of his heart. Could it be that this youth, at the age of 14, had already reached the peak of the Grandmaster realm, with half a foot into the three immortals? Thinking these thoughts, he felt his heart violently convulse and contract, unable to bear it. Those who could step into the Celestial Master realm, which one wasn't a genius? Which one hadn't become famous at a young age, hadn't ascended the Qiankuan list? But now, as time was heartless and their years were growing, they were considered the older generation, but given the long lifespan of the heavenly human realm, their mentality was still young, still in pursuit of higher martial arts. Therefore, they also had a heart full of ambition. However, at this moment, his heart full of ambition was shattered by that single move. When Lin Qifeng was defeated, everyone also briefly fell silent. After all, this was a great grandmaster who had been famous for many years. Vlemper hosted, but before long, people's gazes shifted away from him, and soon, another person took to the stage, having a powerful contender like Lin Qifeng to collide with. Even if one couldn't win, the consumption it caused at the same realm was enormous. This might be an opportunity. But in the next instant, the Grandmaster who took to the stage again was also sent flying out, spitting fresh blood. Down below, Li Wuxuang stared blankly at this scene. From the moment Qin Wuk challenged Li Hao, her full heart of anger was replaced by shock when Li Hao made his move, suppressing Qin Wuk with a single gesture. The peculiar divine soul that had been revealed in the battle with Li Tiangang, which had shocked the entire divine general mansion, she now saw again. Compared to that time, this was even more terrifying. Previously, there was no divine aura of fire covering him, but now his entire body burned with divine light, like an angry deity descending into the world. And the power he displayed was beyond her imagination and knowledge. To think he could, on his own, consecutively defeat many famous grandmasters present, while she was still pursuing the 15th realm, looking forward to the heavenly human realm from afar. That youth already had the demeanor and power to look down upon grandmasters of the world. Was this the gap between them? On the other side, Zhou Haidang stood up and walked towards the stage. Beside him, Zhou Linge and the others came to their senses. Father. Zhou Linge called out urgently, Father, are you also going? No, you can't. She wanted to say, "You can't beat him," but as the words came to her lips, she suddenly felt a bitter and sour taste in her mouth. In her heart, her father was an imposing and steadfast figure, her strongest and most reliable support. But now she had to admit that her father was no match for the young man she had once looked down upon, Master Suwana, and the youth also urgently tried to discourage him. Zhou Haidang shook his head, took a deep breath, and said, "I want to try and also use this opportunity to gauge how far my Grandmaster's Tao is from perfection." He was challenging not only for the promise of Mount Wuliang but also because of the ambition within his Grandmaster's heart. Seeing such an extraordinary youth witnessing such astonishing power with a single gesture, the Tao realm it contained, he wanted to personally experience and feel it. Ignoring his daughter and disciples' attempts to stop him, Zhou Haidang took to the stage. He mobilized his entire body's strength, his pores opened wide, bringing his bodily energy to its peak, achieving unity with the heavens. Then he drew his sword, unleashing his most powerful peerless technique, and slashed fiercely with a loud thud. The moment the sword light touched that chess piece, an immense and vast martial Tao intent enveloped him, and in an instant, Zhou Haidang seemed to feel the surge of heaven and earth directed at his body, engulfing and crushing him. His pupils dilated, then contracted, and he was so horrified that he found himself speechless. So, the martial Tao intent of that youth wasn't just one kind. His body was suddenly thrown backward, landing outside the arena, vomiting a mouthful of fresh blood. His chest clothing was torn to shreds, his appearance extremely pitiable. "Father." Zhou Linger hurriedly approached, her eyes moistening. Zhou Haidang struggled to get up, coughing out fresh blood, quickly took out a vial of precious medicine and swallowed it, stabilizing his condition, and said softly, "I'm all right." He turned his head, looking towards the youth sitting elsewhere. That youth quietly sat in an ordinary chair, yet emitted the sense of being alone atop the summit of peaks, overlooking everything in the world with a transcendental and indifferent air. Chapter 219. Zhou Haidang was defeated. From body to spirit, he was completely defeated. Defeated by the martial arts conception concentrated in that single finger, defeated by the invincible youth's grandmaster strength. But after Zhou Haitang's defeat, another grandmaster immediately stepped onto the debate platform by the roaring waves of Dragon River to contend against that dazzling figure. The grandmasters present also mostly shared Zhou Haitang's sentiment. Apart from Mount Wuliang's promise, they desired to engage with the martial arts conceptions and strength exhibited by the youth who had vanquished them all, to seek and see the ultimate power beyond their imagination. Bang! Bang! The grandmasters advancing to the platform were subsequently crushed and sent flying one after another. They demonstrated their peerless techniques, wielding sabers, swords, spears, staves, fists, palms, and divine skills, but in front of that dazzling figure, all sorts of martial transformations seemed to have corresponding countermeasures. In the end, no one seemed able to shake him. With one young man, the world's grandmasters were suppressed. The crowd could not budge the tip of that finger. As no more grandmasters ascended the stage, all the grandmasters present, including their kin and prodigies from the 19 states gathered at Dayu, fell silent, as quiet as the dead. The only thing standing was that heaven and earth law manifestation cloaked in divine and fierce flames, sitting tranquilly like a cold-eyed deity, looking down at all beings. No one else came to the stage, unable to contend any longer. Whether it was martial arts conception, physical strength, vast spiritual thought, or divine authority of grandmasters, that 14-year-old youth had already reached the pinnacle of them all. Unmatched. This challenge, initiated by Qin Wuk, had lasted 4 hours, but the youth had not needed to lift a finger from beginning to end. His external divine soul alone was enough to suppress everyone and even protect the chess piece carved from fragile stone. One must know, with the strength of a grandmaster, even a sneeze could shatter that stone piece, yet that otherwise ordinary little stone suppressed all the grandmasters under heaven, pinning the esteemed bodhisattva ranked first on the Qian dragon list to the ground, unable to move like a despairing worm. Indeed, aside from the many grandmasters, the most shocked and affected was Qin Wuk himself. For 4 hours he watched grandmasters successively come forward and then defeat, yet he himself remained suppressed without any capacity for resistance. Not only had the youth crushed his body, but he also shattered his Tao heart. Qin Wuk's eyes had lost their luster. As a fellow pride of heaven, he had topped the Qian dragon list for 3 years uncontested, and at 19 he had become a grandmaster, the envy of all. Consider the famous Duke of Martial Punishment from the Li family's divine general mansion, Li Tiangang, had also only entered the heavenly human realm at 19. In other words, his talent was equal to that of the other. If nothing went awry, he would surely ascend to the peak in the future, becoming world-renowned, revered and worshipped as a bodhisattva seated on the lotus platform, receiving billions of devoted prayers. But now his Tao heart was shattered, the sun had set, and the twilight glow of the setting sun cast a tragic layer of gold paper onto the faces of everyone outside the debate platform. This was not just the twilight of the world but also of the grandmasters. Check out Mvlu MP year henceforth, a legend unparalleled in history will rise, a young man will ascend on the wind, suppressing the world at 14 with a single finger. They also understood that from today on, that name on the Qianquan list will shine like a blazing sun, dominating over all the pride of Dayu for 8 years. This record no one could break. The middle-aged Arhat's face was ashen, his eyes filled with shock, anger, and a trace of fear and wariness. Not only was that youth's cultivation speed extraordinary, but his actual combat strength and martial arts conception were unimaginable. A talent so divine it seemed as if a sage had reincarnated, incomparable to anyone. Given time, perhaps within a decade, he might even stand shoulder to shoulder with those old fellows from the Four Stands realm. He took a deep breath, suppressing the rage in his heart, and said solemnly and earnestly, "Donor, since no one can debate with you now, you should let go, right?" Li Hao responded indifferently, "I said before, I need to hear it from him personally, otherwise, how would I know he has conceded? Perhaps he still has a trump card up his sleeve, you should give him a chance to express himself, don't hinder him." Even with 30 years of serenity nurtured through reading scriptures, the middle-aged Arhat nearly spewed blood in anger upon hearing Li Hao's words. Even the Buddha is about to get angry. I hinder him? To hell with you. Qin Wuk was on the verge of losing consciousness, his Tao heart dissolving, yet Li Hao was unrelenting. To admit defeat out loud? That was the last vestige of Qin Wuk's determination, and if that too were shattered, he'd live forever in the shadow of Li Hao. The middle-aged Arhat clenched his teeth, restraining his fury, and said, "Li, mercy should be shown where it can. Do you really want to make an enemy of Mount Wuliang?" Li Hao sneered inwardly, weren't they enemies already? But these things could be done behind the scenes while not so easily spoken of outright. He replied blandly, "Elder, you're overstating. This is merely a normal martial debate. How can we speak of making enemies? He challenged me, and if it's to end, he should be the one to say so. If you wish to seek justice, why didn't you speak up when he challenged me? Using his first place on the Qian Dragon list to challenge me, ranked 5th, clearly it was bullying. Why didn't you object then?" The middle-aged Arhat was at a loss for words, agitated inside. He glanced at the hermit Tianji beside him. Tianji Tower was said to grasp the secrets of heaven, omnicompetent, with nothing in the world hidden from their sight, but this youth had made his name known throughout Qizhou, revealing his 15 Li realm cultivation level, and only then did the world recognize such a demonic talent. Chapter 220. He reached the divine travel realm at an even younger age, yet no one knew. Now, after that great battle, everyone thought that the father went easy during the father-son duel, which is why Li Hao was ranked 5th, but who would have thought, based on the portion of strength that Li Hao displayed today, that if he were to go all out, he could possibly contend with those from the 3 immortal realms. After all, at that time, Li Tiangang had broken his heart oath, was severely injured, and his realm had fallen, no longer as invincible and undefeated as he was during the Northern Yen campaigns. It's one thing for the world to underestimate him, but for Tianji Tower to do so as well? Isn't that harmful? Feeling the angry gaze from the middle-aged Arhat, Hermit Tianji came back to his senses, realizing the anger and feeling somewhat embarrassed, so he had no choice but to step forward. Just as he was about to speak, suddenly, a huge booming sound erupted from afar. The sound was earth-shattering, as if a meteorite had struck the ground. Everyone was jolted, including Li Hao. They all turned their heads to look, only to see that on the nearby city wall, a dazzling purple array pattern emerged. However, it quickly extinguished. Like flames passing over it, at the same time a huge arrow tower and cannon tower within the city had their tops violently shattered. The faces of the people present all turned pale, and then they swiftly changed color, looking shocked at this scene. The way the array disappeared clearly indicated it had been breached. This was the divine array that protected Dayue City. With this array, even if only a heavenly human realm grandmaster were sitting in the city, they could use the city-protecting formation to fend off a 3 immortal realm demon leading a monster invasion for half a day. With half a day's time, it would be enough to call for reinforcements and obtain support from powerful allies, but now, this city-protecting divine array had actually been broken. And since the array had been breached before it was even activated, it meant it was broken from the inside. Only people or demons that had infiltrated the city could achieve such a feat. However, if a demon were to enter the city, they must be registered and carry a pass. Otherwise, the divine array would have already been triggered to kill them. As everyone was in doubt, 2 more arrow towers were also suddenly reduced to rubble. When one of the arrow towers was destroyed, 2 shadowy figures violently shot out from the inside. One silhouette flew straight towards the city wall and smashed into it, while the other shadow pursued and killed, wearing a long robe and having a tall and bulky figure. He held down the head of the person who had hit the wall, and then crushed it with a squeeze. After cultivating the bright jade true demon skill, Li Hao's vision had become sharper than before, even from a distance of over a dozen miles. He could clearly see the scene there, even the gaps between the bricks on the city wall. The one whose head was crushed was, unmistakably, a city-defending officer in armor. The towering figure, with his robe lifting, revealed large patches of crimson muscles, dense body hair, and slightly protruding pointed horns on his head. He was unmistakably a demon. Moreover, his aura was as vigorous and powerful as a furnace, not of the heavenly human realm but of the 3 immortal realms' great demons. And for this reason, without transforming, he easily crushed the heavenly human realm officer. It's a demon. A demon has invaded the city. Not only Li Hao, but others with Grandmaster realm visual strength could also barely make out the scene, and some invoked their divine soul to scrutinize and discern the situation in an instant. At the edge of the debate platform, all the Grandmasters' faces changed color. A demon had actually taken advantage of the opportunity to attack Daiwa City, which was the heartland of the northwest, some distance from the border. It's a great demon from the 3 immortal realms. The middle-aged Arhit named Wen Tianen immediately had a very grave expression. Such a great demon attacking and destroying the array spelled out too much alarming information. He realized that something was not right. He glanced at Hermit Tianji, and as their eyes met, they both sensed a certain crisis. The unrest at the Liangzhou border was not only known to the Li family. Tianji Tower had also detected some information before embarking on his journey to attend this Grandmaster Assembly. When Tianen's Bodhisattva Master had told him about this matter, instructing him to be careful on the way and not to linger at the border. But unexpectedly, a demon had actually been so bold as to invade the city, and judging by the situation, it seemed as if they were attempting to breach the city. Seymour Vlemper, damn! There's a demon army's shadow outside the city. Suddenly, a Grandmaster exclaimed. Several Grandmasters had their divine souls ascend and had already probed other directions, sensing the commotion outside the city. The area outside Daiwa City was an extensive plain, with a view that stretched for 100 miles, leaving no place for demons to hide. But now, at the edge of the sky, there was a black tide-like line rolling in. These demons have plotted their approach. Hurry and contact the city lord's mansion. Damn it! The city protecting formation has broken. How can we defend now? What's there to fear? These demons have picked the wrong time to attack. With all the Grandmasters from across the world gathered here, they've kicked an iron board. Gentlemen, as the demons close in, we martial practitioners are duty-bound to slay demons and eradicate evil. Who will join me in demon hunting? There were many Grandmasters present. Although not all Grandmasters in the world had arrived, at least 80% of them were there, so there was no fear. Boom. As they finished speaking, the last cannon tower on the eastern wall also shattered, and a figure in gray robes flew out of it, merely glancing over at the Dragon River side. Just that glance, though only from a distance of over a dozen miles, sent a chill down the spines of Wen Tianen and Hermit Tianji, who had just been preparing to take action, causing their bodies to stiffen. That glance brought such a coldness that they felt a terrifying shadow of death. The next moment, a multitude of screams erupted from a distance within the city. The tall figure revealed its true form, turning into a bull demon of immense size. Its body rammed at will, destroying houses. It opened its mouth to inhale, and a demon wind swept through, sucking up the citizens trying to flee from the ground. It swallowed dozens of people in one gulp, and as it chewed, vivid red blood sprayed from the corners of its mouth like the juice of ripe fruit, refreshing. The bull demon laughed loudly and chased after more prey. Upon witnessing this, everyone was filled with rage. Lin Qifeng, who had been previously defeated by Li Hao, now swallowed a pill. His arm injury healed at an astonishing rate, visibly to the naked eye. He stepped forward, the power of a fully realized great Grandmaster realm giving him the courage to confront that 3 immortal realm bull demon, hoping to stop it. With the strength of the many Grandmasters, there might be a chance to Stop the demon's charge, but just as he took his first step, a shadow flew out from the distant horizon and came crashing down onto the debate platform, smashing the platform's stone into a deep pit. Inside the pit was an armored figure with a broken helmet, glazed eyes, and a cracked skull. Recognizing the face, Hermit Tianji's complexion changed drastically. It was none other than the Lord of Dayue City. With a thunderous noise, the ground shook violently. Two figures descended from the sky, landing in front of everyone, creating deep craters in the ground. As the dust rose, one of them waved his hand, dissipating the dust cloud to reveal his tall and sturdy form. His face was handsome, but his cheeks were covered with thick hair, his eyes a purplish hue, radiating a demonic light. He looked around at everyone casually, his gaze pausing for a moment on Li Hao's heaven and earth law manifestation. Such delicious essence. The robes he wore now revealed their true color, a purple-gold long garment looking extraordinarily noble. Behind him stood the gray-robed elder. The elder smiled, his gaze seemingly on everyone, but at the same time as if they weren't really there. Two great demons. Everyone's heart quaked, feeling the intense presence, causing a tremble in their hearts and minds. While the grandmasters there were all-powerful figures in their own right, they were somewhat at their wits' end in front of the three immortal realm great demons. Fortunately, their numbers were also substantial, and with the presence of Wen Tianen and Hermit Tianji, they were not at a disadvantage. Finally, I can release myself. I've been suffocating these past few days. The purple-gold-robed bearded young man stretched out his arms and twisted his neck, a playful smile on his lips as he walked straight toward the crowd. The disciples and relatives of these grandmasters involuntarily stepped back, their faces deathly pale. They were not Tianren grandmasters. Under the presence of these great demons, they trembled uncontrollably as if they were in an ice cave. At that moment, the 200 to 300 grandmasters there felt utterly oppressed by the presence of these two great demons, experiencing a sense of terror, and the heaven and earth law manifestation that had been pressing its finger upon Qin Wuk now withdrew its hand, and the chess piece in its hand shone brightly. It was suddenly thrown, shooting towards the purple-robed young man like a shooting star, tearing a gap through the terrifying and overwhelming demonic presence.